Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sipping Tea with Sabrina. Today, we're going to be talking about sponsorships for nonprofits. I just love that music, y'all. So, let's see. We are going to be introducing our guest speaker today. We're going to put her up. And guys, I always ask for grace, right? Because tech is just not my thing. But we got Mariah here. So
Hi,
again, hi Mariah, how you doing?
awesome. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So, I just wanted to let everybody know that if you never met me before, I'm Sabrina, the founder of Supporting World Hope, a nonprofit coaching and consulting company. I started after 25 years in the industry. I help nonprofits and small businesses build relationships that increase revenue. And we have with us today Mariah Monique from the Sponsorship Catalyst. This conversation is critical, especially if you want to secure sponsorships for your nonprofit. I remember the first time I had to put together my first sponsorship packet. I had no idea what I was doing, but today we're giving you a head start. That is why we have Mariah with us. But before we get started, we're live streaming this. So if you can engage, do a like or a heart or some type of button so that we know you can hear us and let us know where you're watching from. And even if you're watching in rebroadcast, this is going to help us with our algorithms. So, Mariah, can you share a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. Super excited. It's always good to connect with you, Sabrina. Such a sweet, sweet person, and I know you're very knowledgeable in the nonprofit world. So, a little bit about me. So, I have started my business really because I initially I am a funder, and I realized that most people do not know what to present to sponsors or how to navigate conversations. And so from 2020, I started to really realize the shift as we all recognize the shift where the pandemic was happening, racial things were happening, political things were happening, and these companies were saying, let's shift our dollars to support more of these things that we were not supporting. Um, I too was tasked with that exact same, command, if you will. And what I realized as I went out to go look for particular type of organizations, primarily BIPOC-led organizations or organizations that serve marginalized communities, I realized those nonprofit leaders either did not know sponsorships existed or they just did not know how to navigate them. So that birthed the sponsorship catalyst where I really focus on closing the knowledge gap for people that I know probably were already underfunded. And so, I've been on this journey for the last 2 years of coaching clients on how to secure sponsorships, but also how to be confident in the value that they bring with their organization to a sponsor. And so when I am teaching, I really have a trifold perspective because not only am I a funder, I also am personally a sponsorship seeker myself. So I understand what it looks like when you put these things into practice. I understand the patience and the grace you have to extend throughout the entire journey. And then I also have coached clients on how to secure sponsorships for their events. And so really I kind of get three angles of it and I essentially bring it to people that I work with. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm excited to be in a position to share with you all today, especially as it relates to sponsors as well as just strategic partnerships, because I am very skilled at making those things happen. So excited for
So
you.
you see why we got her here, right? Because she is a guru in this area. I like to do a little shout outs before we get started with questions. I want to shout out to Mommy and Marsha. I like to shout out people who show up and make comments. Thank you for being here. So one of our first questions, because you said this, a lot of people don't know what sponsorships are. So what is a corporate sponsor?
A corporate sponsor is a organization that partners with typically a nonprofit organization They do also support for-profit businesses, but they are basically making a commitment to fund an event or initiative or program in exchange for some sort of value. Now, that value typically comes in exchange of brand benefits or visibility or access to your audience. And so, in exchange for their dollars that they are giving you as an organization, they're expecting something in return, which is why sponsorships are not donations. Donations do not have strings attached. Someone donates, they don't ask for branding, they don't ask for, put their logo on your website, they don't ask for those things. Sponsorships and corporate sponsors use sponsorships as a marketing tool, and they want, in exchange for their dollars, some sort of brand benefit. So hopefully that cleared a myth, that they're
it did. Even I got a aha moment of that one. I was like, oh yeah, sponsorships are not donations because they are getting something in exchange. So how do corporate sponsorships work? With that in mind, how does corporate sponsorships work?
Yeah, that's really a broad question. But one of the things that I will say regarding that, and I do want to make it clear that not all sponsors have to be corporations. Some larger nonprofit organizations also support via sponsorship. You also have local businesses that just want to get their brand, their name out there within the community that also support sponsorships, that also support via a sponsorship as well. So I want us to think about, there's the top dogs, right? The Targets of the world, the Googles of the world, right? But then there's also maybe some local large organizations like health insurance plans, or even health or even local big banks in your area that maybe you're missing because you're trying to get those top dogs. And even those smaller organizations that are really local to your community, like coffee shops or things of that nature. Now, in terms of how it works, it really just very dependent on that organization, which is why I am a huge advocate and trying to teach people to have what I call an alignment call with a sponsor. Now, of course, you're going to be doing some due diligence on the front end. You're going to make sure that, like, if they have a website, you've gone through it to understand how their sponsorships work, what they support, what they don't support, how to submit a sponsorship. Not all corporations or not all sponsors will have an actual page that you can find out that information. So if they do, great, because they probably have outlined it all there, and they kind of push you to an application portal. If they don't, it's really important to work to set up a alignment call to ask specific questions to gain insight on how their sponsorship program works. It's not going to all be the same for each organization, so it's definitely some effort, definitely some research, some due diligence that has to go into sponsorships prior to getting to a yes. Another thing I would say with that is that you really want to make sure you're going into these conversations as if there is a mutual benefit, because there is, right? Oftentimes when people are pitching to me, sometimes I recognize when they are coming to the conversation kind of like, oh, just, give us this money. We're just a little organization. And it's like, no, like, you have made an impact in the community. You are the hands and the feet of the community. You bring value. And as a sponsor, I want access to your organization. I want access to your audience. So, like, really come to that table, understanding you come at the same level, even though they are, funding something. You bring what they actually want, which is a captive audience that you have been nurturing, that you are an expert with. And so, broad question. I mean, we could talk a long time about this one.
I'm so happy that you said that. I think a lot of times nonprofit come with the mentality of servitude, and they don't understand the value that they bring. And I'm so happy that you, as an expert, are saying that you bring value. Lots of times it's a mindset thing. So thank you so much for saying that and advocating for that. So I don't want to get you asked some of my questions, answer some of my questions that I had prepped here. So I do have a question, and you don't have to give away your course information and all that. But what's the top question you can ask on an alignment call?
Oh, okay, good. There's so many. I think one of the top questions, there really are so many. Can I give three? I have 30. Three is not even 1%. Okay, so one of the questions I would ask, one is, what brand benefits do they value? It's almost like I teach this like it's almost like asking a kid what they want to eat for dinner. And you ask them and they tell you, and then if you deliver something different, they might be upset, you know? And so when I think about sponsors, it's like if you ask them what brand benefits they value, and when you put that pitch deck together where you give it to them, there's a high chance they're going to say, oh yeah, this is exactly what we wanted. We've already kind of met. We've already kind of had those conversations. We believe in your vision. This is a go. You're likely to heighten your chances of a yes than versus giving them something that they don't value. For instance, if an organization's goal is to increase their email list, you know, they're going to want to value where you're putting their logo on your newsletter. And if you have a really high subscription to your newsletter, open rate, click rate, like that's valuable information for a sponsor that cares about that type of exposure. And so that's actually kind of a twofold question. So one, what benefits do they value? Two, what are their actual organizational goals? Because with your event, you're trying to figure out how can my event help you meet your goals? Again, it should always feel like a mutual connection. Sponsorship should be a win-win for everybody. And then the third question I say that I would ask would be, I feel like I just want to give so many more. I would say the third question I would ask would be maybe what's their turnaround time? And the reason for that is because you want to be able to understand and really map out, you know, when you need to be going out after a sponsor. And sometimes these answers are not just for the one moment that you're seeking them, but sometimes it's really for the future. So you should be tracking like, okay, I've got Coca-Cola. They say they need at least 6 months. Let me go ahead and track them, because eventually if you decide to delegate this role to a developer, then you're going to want to be able to pass that information to them and say, hey, Coca-Cola needs at least 6 months. So we know how to time frame everything. And we also know when we should be kind of planning our event. So that's pretty important.
Okay, so you just created another question, but before we move
Awesome.
on, if you're just joining us, welcome to our broadcast. We're currently talking about sponsorships for nonprofits, and we've covered various topics. You got to go back and you got to listen to this. We talked about what is a corporate sponsor. We talked about alignment calls. We talked about the difference between sponsorships and donations, creating a win-win situation. So again, let us know where you're watching from and click the like or heart or some type of engagement button, because this is going to help us with our algorithms. And I wanted to give a shout out to Richard and Dorothy, who has joined us, and Danielle and Kids So Genius. Thank y'all. Micah, Anita, thank y'all for showing up and for being here. So this is juicy, right? This is some great tea. She knows exactly what she's talking about. So you said something. You opened the door for another question that's not here, but you got this. So that question is: you said that national nonprofits, as well as some local businesses, also provide sponsorships. Is there a list out there somewhere for national nonprofits?
There's not a list. So this is where grants and sponsorship differ, right? You can go to grant, find out and do some filtering. For sponsorships, it's really going to be based off of, I say two things. One, your data, your audience, right? Your audience data should drive your outreach. And then two, I mean, there's brands all over. I tell people, go look in your fridge, go look in your clothes. You can just drive by your house and there's brands that you can be reaching out to. But one of the things that I would say regarding that is that it's really going to be tailored toward your organization and what the organization that you're seeking to secure a sponsorship from, what they care about. Unfortunately, there is no list. And the challenging thing about, sponsorships is that, not all companies have websites. I mentioned that earlier. So oftentimes there is a great level of research and effort that goes in on the front end to secure contact, to secure an email, right? But there are some very simple practices that I think people forget because they're not as traditional as like back in the day. You used to go into a job and hand them your resume. It's not the same like that anymore. But there are some simple things that I think people can do in order to identify contacts. I'm big on using LinkedIn. And so, you know, there are specific job titles that you could be searching within an organization that you identify that could potentially be a right fit. And then going on LinkedIn, finding those potential contacts. I usually like to find about 2 or 3 within an organization, and then just reaching out. Sometimes you get something, sometimes you don't. But the point is that you kind of cast your net and then see what comes back to you, so you can kind of progress in that conversation of potentially pitching an opportunity for that organization to be a part of. So no, unfortunately, there's not a list, but there's ways to work around that.
Okay. So you kind of went into how to start building relationships with corporations. What
Yeah.
are some other practical steps to start building those relationships?
Yeah. It's really going to be focusing in on, I think about it like dating. And I believe I talked about this in the
Yeah.
pre-interview, where it's like, we are not kissing on the first date. We're going through every stage that we need to go to, because the goal is to get to the point where there's a marriage. And in the sponsorship world, that's considered like a partnership where people are writing you into their budget. But if you don't do the, you know, steps on the front end, you know, you're going to be skipping those relationship building steps. And so one of the things, I'm just putting on my funder's hat, that I really enjoy about some of the organizations I work with is that they check on me, or they reach out to me when they don't need money. And
Thank
so
you for saying that, girl. Thank you for saying that.
yes. And this could look like, hey, Mariah, you know, how are you doing? Or how are things over at such and such? Or it could be something like, oh man, I just saw an article come out about, you know, what y'all are doing at such and such, you know, how does your role play into that? You know, and so it's just really like kind of being up on your sponsors. And for some people, that they may feel like that's a lot of work, but it's a relationship building is a lot of work. And if they're going to potentially be long-term partners and really funding you at a high level, and I'm not talking about, you know, anything less than $5,000 or $10,000. I mean, big dollars could
Mhm.
be potentially yours by building a relationship. The other thing I think that is important is that I always teach this strategy. If I'm going to a gala event, or even if I'm at like a community event, I'm going to those booths. I want to see, hey, is a sponsorship person here? Because sometimes I'm on site at events, right? Even at like gala events, when they're shouting out big sponsors and those tables are clapping, I know after that event is over, I'm making a beeline, because I'm also building a network of other people that do what I do. And so I just think when you're out and you're networking and you're going to events, it's like always be intentional. Every event I go to, I try to make a goal of walking out of with 2 to 3 new contacts. And whether that means there be a sponsor or not, it's just being more intentional about what you're doing at the event. And so I think it's really
Language. You're speaking my language.
I think it's really important for not just you as a nonprofit leader, but you to create with it a culture within your organization where, you know, your staff down from you, your direct reports, also have this mentality that when you're out being intentional, like always keeping your ears open for potential opportunities to partner with someone else, and always being intentional about who you're actually talking to, because that's important as well. And just having a level of professionalism and tact as you're doing that, because, you know, sometimes I meet people and they're just so aggressive that I'm like, oh, I will never work with you. And recognize, Sabrina, this is key. Like, recognize if you are getting in the way of the money. Like, if you are not the best communicator, or if you're just a visionary and that's just your lane, be okay to have someone on your team that is better at building relationships to do that, because sometimes it is the leader that gets in the way of the money.
And that's a great way to use your board of directors. People
Yeah,
are always complaining about their board, but if you can get your board to focus on building those relationships, and you know that that's their strength, then have them do that. Thank you. Y'all, you see what I'm talking about? She knows what she's talking about. That's what I'm saying. So what? So we built the relationship, right? We're in that phase where we had the alignment call. We built the relationship. But I know everybody and their mama is coming for the sponsorship. What makes my nonprofit stand out when requesting a sponsorship?
yeah. I would say really how you frame your sponsorship materials. So, like, for instance, I think about people's mission on a very basic level, where it's like sometimes the mission statements that are written, they're so vague that it'll say something like, we exist to give kids an opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, doesn't say
Okay,
that.
but what does that mean? what does that mean? Right? So I would encourage people, if you feel like your mission is not as strong, tell me a little bit more about that. How are you doing that? Are you using a STEM program? Are you building self-image? Like, what does that look like? Because when I see it, I'm like, okay, well, how is this different from the next person? Another thing that I would say is that sometimes we see sponsorship decks that are just poorly done. They don't have any data analytics, which is important for a sponsor to understand potential return on investment or how many eyes that they'll be able to have their brand on. People just leave those details out. And what I've realized as I've coached clients over the last few years is that oftentimes they're leaving those details because, one, they're not capturing them. So capture your details, even if you have to use an Excel sheet, even if you have to use paper and pen to capture details as you're feeding people or as you're giving something out, like, get the details. So they're either not capturing the data or they feel like their data is too small, which is untrue. Depending on the type of organization you have, like, a sponsor can support something that just has 10 folks in it. Now, will it be $50,000? It could be, depending on your audience, because I know that has happened before. But it could still be something that's $3,000 or $5,000, which is still beneficial for you to cover that entire event for 10 people, and probably still have some left over. So I think it's important for them to actually capture data, as well as understanding that all of your data is valuable, and don't look at it as something small.
Okay.
So that's what I would say for that. Yeah.
Okay, now I want y'all to hear the numbers that Mariah is throwing out. She gives out money and she's saying small is 3,000, 5,000. So
Yeah.
will y'all please stop asking $500 for the
Please.
sponsorship? Please, please. Small is 3,000, 5,000. Okay? Ask. What the worst they can say is no, but we'll give you this. That's just a mindset thing. So I wanted to make sure I put it out there. I got one more question for you, then I'm going to open it up for other questions in the group.
Okay.
So, what is the best practice that you can share about corporate sponsorships?
The best practice. I would say following through. I would say following through. There are time and time again where I work with an organization and they just don't follow through. We've come to this, point of solidifying an agreement. They say yes, we say yes, we're in this thing together, and they don't fulfill the sponsorship agreement that we had, or they don't like follow up with like the end of event report, which is so important. Most people just forget this step. They're like, we got the money, our event is over, we're taking a break because that was a lot. And I get that. But you miss an opportunity to solicit feedback from your sponsor, one. You also miss an opportunity to be able to communicate to that sponsor how the event went by numbers, even testimonials that you get from people that attend your event, as well as to be able to show them how you did fulfill those sponsorship benefits for them as you all agreed upon. This is a huge opportunity to even get a post if they would want to come back. But oftentimes you don't do it, or people don't do it, and then we don't hear back from you until the next 6 to 7 months. And then it's like, well, what happened last time? But then it's so far away that you may or may not have that information to just readily give me. So I would definitely say following up and then doing some type of fulfillment report or a wrap report is what it's called in the sponsorship world. And I guess I also would add, Sabrina, even before you get to that part, right? Because this is kind of like at the end, when you've already secured the sponsorship, before you get a sponsorship, I would say do some due diligence, because sometimes people are just, they call it the spray and pray method, where you got this deck and you're just kind of putting it out there and just hoping somebody, will catch it. While that is a tactic, it's probably one of the least effective tactics in today's world of sponsorships. So you really want to make sure that you're doing due diligence on the front end and making sure you're being very strategic. It's also going to be a time saver for you and your team. So that's what I would say for that.
I appreciate that. And let me just be the first to say I have committed the sin of not sending a fulfillment report. Last year, I got a little better with it.
Progression.
It is. It's like, man, I'm done with that event and I'm tired. I just want to move on. But it does make a difference. So thank you for saying that. We got some, well, before I go into the questions, because there are some questions down here, but we got a little bit of time. What are some of the best decks, examples of some of the best decks that you've received?
Like what's in them,
Yeah,
or
what's in them? Because you said the analytics, but what are the exact analytics are you looking
ooh,
for?
okay, so I can answer that one.
Okay.
Okay, so some of the analytics that people look for, they're looking for social media engagement, they're looking for followers, but they also want to know some engagement. So
Mm,
it might be like impressions that you're getting from social media, and it can be all social media, even YouTube. If you leverage YouTube with your nonprofit, if there's podcasts that you leverage, if there's Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those things. We're going to be looking at audience data. So that could be if it's for a specific event and it's a recurring event, we want to know what happened last year. How many people showed up? What was the demographics? We want to know maybe even some testimonials, because it's not just numbers. Like we want to, some people are compelled, some sponsors are compelled to give because you've shared some testimonials of transformation that has happened with audiences that basically engage with your organization all the time. And so we like to see an array of data. We also want to see things like, again, if you're offering newsletter benefit, we want to see the numbers of that. What's your open rate, click rate? How many subscribers do you have? We want to know, maybe even sometimes people will put in there, sponsors had a 10% increase in sales at our event, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's an expo and people are actually selling things. So you want to be able to have that information in there, because if I care about it, then that's going to like pique my interest. I also see data in there that really focuses in on, just trying to jog my memory. Did I say demographics already?
You said demographics, but you just changed my whole. I'm on a board right now, and we're doing an event, and you just changed my whole approach. I just want you to know.
Oh, oh,
Thank,
good, oh, good. Well, I'll stop there because I mean,
thank
that's
you so much.
good.
So, because as you're sitting there and you're saying that, one of the troubles that I had when I ran my organization for 20 years was transferring the relationship from me as the CEO to the organization. But if
Mm,
we're sharing testimonials, we always have a videographer at our event. And if we share that in the process of the fulfillment report and what people are saying about the organization,
yep.
that's a part of the transfer.
Yep. You can
So
also embed videos. You can also embed videos in your decks too. So yeah, I actually do that with my clients, because there's three types of sponsors you're going to talk to. A thinker, they want numbers. They're very subjective. They're like, what are the facts? The fillers, they're compelled by emotional stories, which is where why your testimonials are important. They will probably watch the videos. The thinkers probably won't care about the videos. And then the deferrers will make sure that there's just brand alignment, and that their brand reputation is going to be a perfect merger with what you're doing. So when you're creating a deck, you want to kind of have something that will serve all those people, because you just never know what you're going to get. Me as a sponsor, I'm more of a thinker than a filler, but I kind of really am all three of them. And so you just never know who you're going to get, which is why I think your sponsorship package should really have a mixture of different things to speak to those people.
okay, that makes so much sense. So I've been looking down only because I want to make sure I get everybody's
Yeah,
questions that are being
there's
asked.
a lot of good questions, so I'm
Yeah,
excited.
yeah. So Alicia says, what are the corporate role titles which are best to target for reaching out on LinkedIn?
Great question. So a few of them are corporate giving manager, specialist, coordinator, um, community relations specialist, manager, coordinator, brand partnership. There's also a business development and brand partnerships as well. Sometimes they're kind of like two of them. Sometimes you can find them under the marketing department. We kind of talked about this, I believe, during the pre-interview, that sometimes it's under marketing, sometimes under communication, sometimes under a different arm within an organization. So marketing manager or marketing specialist could also be a potential title. Philanthropy, if there's something that's like philanthropy for a corporation, then that is also a title. So that's just to name a few. You just go search people within a particular brand on LinkedIn, and people will pop up.
Okay. So Micah is saying, I love relationships, but have such a challenge with cold calls and emails. And mommy says she has the same struggle. So is there any advice that you can give to them?
Yeah, detach yourself emotionally from the work of just pressing send. because it has to get out. So you're either going to be really tired of paying out of pocket or tapping into your operational budget, or you're just going to face the fear of releasing that email, or making that phone call that potentially alleviate financial stress. That, not to say you're going through financial stress, because that may not be the cause, but if that is the case, then it could alleviate some of that. If stress is not the cause of it, it also can allow you to do more for your audience. So maybe it's not causing financial stress, but maybe you actually want to expand your reach. So that extra money will help. Another thing I would say, like I said earlier, is that if you have a team, leverage your team. Leverage your team. People that may have they're not as emotionally tied to your baby as you are. And so sometimes it's just really like being able to kind of let it go, especially if you've worked on that email and you feel like it is good to go. Have someone on your team or leverage your board to do that type of work. Cold calling sometimes is very scary for folks, which is why I also teach, when you're leveraging your board and your staff, have them make warm introductions. Because I think it's important that if you have staff and you have board members, that you're tapping into their relational resources as well. Because that's kind of the point of being able to build a nonprofit, is being able to tap into all those different areas for you all to grow. So
you are crossing all over those boundaries. That's why it's so important to determine who's going to be on your board, because
yes,
they bring the credibility and they bring the relationships.
yes.
So, Micah asked, what report is going to be a fulfillment report? I actually have a sample in Canva that I'll drop the link for you. Now, Danielle is saying, how do you calculate a return on investment for a specific donor? For instance, if it's a boutique and we're asking for a $3,000 sponsorship, let me hit more. Let's see, hold on. And she's asking for a $3,000 sponsorship. What language and data can be used for pitching them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you talk about calculating return on investment, it's really going to depend. I really call this return on opportunity, right? So like return on investment sounds really like salesy, and yeah, you are selling a sponsorship, but return on opportunity just seems a little bit more fitting for a nonprofit, because sometimes it's not a financial exchange. And sometimes it's not easy to track, like if your audience has converted into a customer for any organization. You're just not always able to track that, especially if you don't have infrastructure, which I find most small to mid-sized organizations don't have structure or infrastructure to really evaluate each of those things. It takes a lot, actually, and it's really expensive. And so when I think about return on opportunity, if I just kind of put on my funder's hat, I'm looking at exposure, which is really free. I'm giving you $3,000 for exposure to your communities on whatever platforms that you may have. I'm looking at those impression numbers after the event. I'm also thinking about, like, when someone enters into an event, if there's event signage, which is a brand benefit you can offer a sponsor, and let's say you have 300 people that come to that event, that's exposure. That is the return on the opportunity, right? Because that's 300 people that now you get to have your brand in front of. And so if you're thinking about like pitching to this boutique, I really want to speak on something about that, but just
let it go. Let it out there.
Okay, just because sometimes local businesses don't care about all the deck, they don't always need everything. They could be okay with a letter and you letting them know, hey, can you sponsor at this level? And this is what you would get. You may not have to put together an entire deck for them. But so I did want to make note of that. Sometimes you don't have to do a bunch for the local smaller organizations. So for instance, for this boutique, if you're asking for $3,000, the value isn't always a one-to-one match. It's never a one-to-one match, right? You're basically going to be offering them brand benefits that will that you have deemed would be appropriately valued at the $3,000. Now, evaluating for sponsorship or doing evaluation for sponsorship to determine, like, is this even worth 3,000 or not, is very, very challenging, and not all organizations really know how to do that. It's actually one of the it's a very expensive thing to have someone do an evaluation of a sponsorship, because it just costs a lot of money, and people are really experts in that type of data. And so when you think about $3,000, you can offer, 5 brand benefits, and like that's it. I think the most important thing for that boutique is to understand, is it their audience? Do they want to sell to moms only? Do they want to sell to, people that are getting married? Is it their audience? Because if it's their audience, then there's a potential there'll be some sort of return for them. So Danielle, hopefully that answers your question, but it's kind of a loaded one. So
Yeah, it makes sense though. I got a couple more questions. I got a lot of questions here, so I'm trying to get through them. Um, a little bit of time because I'll share a sample, and I know you probably have some too. But can you please expand on a fulfillment report or give us an example of what should be in there? And that's from Danielle too.
yeah, fulfillment reports should be, 2 to 3 pages, nothing too long. It could be 1 page. What you have in there is that you would talk about the event. You want to give some data from the event, how many people showed up, how many people got to engage with my brand particularly, what the foot traffic looked like. And then you also want to list in that fulfillment report everything that you fulfilled for that sponsor. So all your sponsors will come in at different levels, which means they get access to different brand benefits. So if I come in as ABC company, in that fulfillment report, you're going to say, here's how we fulfilled your brand benefits. We had 3 signs. We had your logo at the front entrance. We had, your logo on lanyards, whatever it is that you fulfilled for them to get their brand out, that's what you're going to want to put in there. But you're also going to want to share event data. You also want to have some photos. Photos are good to just kind of have in there so they can see the event happening in action. Again, you're talking to more than one type of funding person. And so you want to make sure that visually, as well as kind of the word and the data, are all mixed in together. And then I think it's also a good opportunity when you send it in the email to just say, hey, we would love to hop on a call with you in a week, or on this day, do you have some availability? And this is an opportunity to just, again, talk about what happened, talk about the report, but then to ask them if this is something that they would want to come back to in the future. So hopefully that helps you, Danielle. And I saw a few others ask that question.
Yeah, yeah. So Kimberlyn asked, what are the things you can offer for different sponsorship levels for our fundraisers? You had started to go into that a little bit. And Mika said, my name is Mika, not Micah. I got you, Mika. I got you.
Great question, Kimberlyn. So there are several things. So for a fundraiser, I'm assuming there's going to be some event tickets. So you can offer event tickets. You can offer event signage at the event. This could be as simple as you're rolling all of your sponsors on a TV screen that happens to be an event. It could be the form of tent table pop-ups or whatever that looks like. It could be verbal recognition. Someone from the stage just verbally talks about the sponsors that they have. And sometimes I've seen decks where only people who support at the higher level get that verbal recognition. These are typically people who are going to probably have some bigger organizations, some heavy hitter organizations within their event. But it doesn't necessarily need to be that, right? If you feel like your highest person is that person, you only want to verbally recognize that person, that organization, then you can do that as a benefit and not have it in the other tiers. Logo on website. Sometimes there's logo on website with a link to the organization's company. That's kind of like an added thing. So it's like logos on website is like lower than logo on website with the link. There's things like newsletter, like an e-blast, meaning their logo goes out on that. There's press releases, there's photo op opportunities. And so, there are several things you can do. You can get creative with it. But most of the brand benefits are similar. I mean, if you have access to radio, you can offer 30-second radio spots or 15-second commercial spots, whatever that might look like for you. What I will tell people is that only give what you have the capacity to execute on. Okay. It's one thing to get a yes, but it's another thing to manage it. And so it's really important that you're only offering things that you can do, because again, if you do that fulfillment report and you don't do something, then it could ding you for next time. So be mindful of that.
Okay. We can ask a couple more questions and I'm excited. So Andrea is saying, how would you word, yes, your company is getting something in return, but you are helping to build a stronger community, and that in itself is a reward.
Yes, I love that. However, these people want a return on their investments. So while they know they're supporting nonprofit organizations, there's already like a cost to it, right? So if they support nonprofits, they already kind of know that like in return, there is a sense of giving to a community that needs the support. And so one of the things that I would say in terms of framing that would be, again, understanding what their goals are. So for instance, if their goals are like, let me just say a bank, and maybe they have a goal to increase their, maybe it's like a credit union, so local to your community, and they have a goal of increasing their in their new accounts 100 for the year, right? Your one event could maybe do 3 of them, right? You never know. You cannot necessarily put a number to that, but allowing them to say, hey, we've got an audience that are learning financial literacy through our programming. They might need a bank. And so it's just really helping them understand what you're doing, what your programming looks like, what your event is focused in on, and then seeing how it makes sense for them to also meet their goal as well. And so if you are working with the bank, it might be, hey, we can give you access to the audience so that you can potentially increase your open account rate. And then sometimes it's like, hey, well, we don't have a financial literacy program. Will someone from your bank come and they could sponsor that? You can ask for it. Or it could be something in kind where they're coming to your organization and they are giving financial literacy to your audience. And so it's really a win-win for all 3 parties, your organization, your audience, and your sponsors. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, because it's people, corporate corporation or sponsors are different from donations. If we go back to the original statement that you said, that's not your target audience when you're dealing with sponsorships. So Allison says, how can I use my board's contacts to help my organization if they are unwilling to ask them? Do I have board members introduce me, then go from there? I have something to say about that, but I'm gonna let you go first.
I mean, the answer is yeah. The answer is yes. You would have that board member introduce you, even make it easier for them. Maybe write up the introduction email and just have them send it on their behalf,
Mm-hmm.
and then take it from there. There's probably some other dynamics that might be at play. So Sabrina, I'm curious to know what you're going to say because I know you work with boards. Other thing I would say is that I know consultants that are hired into nonprofits that take that load off. So sometimes the board members are tired of asking their people, and so they will pass that information to the consultant that's working with them on an event, and the consultant takes that role because they're not emotionally tied to it. It's not like they already have an existing friendship. It's like, hey, on the shoulders of X, Y, and Z on the board, I'm coming on behalf of them. So it's just less. It's like a less it's less resistance to wanting to just go ahead and reach out because the consultant kind of bears that weight. So yeah, I'm curious to know what you say,
So
Sabrina.
this is what I'm going to say. And I need people to understand this when we're talking about fundraising and your board, that asking is only 5% of fundraising. 60% of fundraising is cultivation. So if you can get your board to build relationships, share those relationships with you as the CEO or the executive director, then yes, you are the one who makes the ask, because they're lending their credibility to you and the organization, and they're lending their contacts to you, and so you take it up from there. But in cultivation, they're the ones who should be, calling that potential donor and saying, hey, Sabrina from da 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 might be calling you, or hey, did you know I serve on this board, or do you want to go to lunch? And then they're talking about the organization. When they're at a networking event, they're like, oh, did you know I serve on this board, or those kinds of things. And if you get your board to focus on that, look, there's top 6 ways: meetings, face to face, picking up the phone, having your board members pick up the phone just to say hi. Mariah said it at the top. I appreciate when sponsors call me just to check in on me. Make a comment on my LinkedIn. If you can get your board members to do that, they are fundraising. And then you suck it up, and you're the one who says, will you consider an investment of $10,000 in my organization? Especially if you are a paid CEO. That is your job when the board is working on the cultivation. And sometimes if they do cultivation right, you don't even have to utter that statement because they know what you mean. So that's my 2 cents. Uh, so let's see. Um, Kimberly had a comment. She said, "Thank you so much. I have to go back to the beginning. I'm off to a black and brown pitch for Black History Month. Thank you, thank you, thank you." So she had to jump off. I think that might have been our last question. Did you see any, Mariah, that I might have missed?
Looking through now, I think that that was the last one. Hopefully, we covered them.
I think we did. We covered a lot of information. And so I just want to make sure that if you are looking for fundraising, board development, not sponsorships, you can go to my website at www.supportingworldhope.com, for some information. But if you're looking specifically for sponsorship information, Mariah is your girl. She has proven that she knows what she's talking about. I've taken some notes myself. So, Mariah, tell the people how they can get in contact with you.
Yes, so you can go to my website at www.thesponsorshipcatalyst.com. You can connect with me on Instagram as well as LinkedIn at the Sponsorship Catalyst. And this stuff just really makes me passionate. I get fired up. I probably can talk for a whole nother hour. But yes, please connect with me if you're looking to secure sponsors or you're looking to understand how to build, pitch strategy for sponsors for your upcoming events this year. Pitch season, in my opinion, is all the time. So, you should always be preparing and making sure that, you're going after sponsors at least 6 months prior to your event. So if you got something planned in 6 months and you're not ready, connect with me for sure.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I just want people to know if there's a topic that you want to hear about, hit me up on Facebook at Supporting World Hope to let me know. But we are kind of full for this year. Mariah was my kickoff girl, and let me say she bought the fire. So I'm
Yay.
very excited about that. I'm hoping people will reach out to you because you are good at what you do. And so this is what I'm going to say. I'm going to leave you with this. Your mission matters and deserves to be highlighted in your community. Your mission matters and can be an inspiration to those who need it the most. Your mission matters and deserves to be funded to its fullest capacity. And I'll see you on March the 29th with our next Sipping Tea, when our guest will be Melissa Smith, talking about how to organize a kick ass fundraiser. And that's Sipping Tea with Sabrina. See you next time. Bye bye, guys.